welcome to Steel Mint Events. China, the world's greatest commodity giant, has entered, or rather it is re-entering the global steel recycling business. Come January, it is likely to make some amendments to its steel scrap import policy. These amendments are going to help a lot of Chinese traders import more of scrap materials. This is quite significant because it is not just likely to alter the global recycling industry, but it also has a bearing in all of the steel complex globally. So that's our webinar for the day, and it is titled China's Scrap Import Policy, How Will It Change the Market Dynamics? So let me introduce the speakers to you. Our first speaker is Mr. Tao Jiangsheng. He is Deputy Secretary General of China Association of Metal Scrap Utilization, or CAMU as it is better known, and he's in the DRI Working Committee based in China. He has been in the DRI production and consultation business for over 23 years. He set up the Tianjin Overworld Technology Consulting Group, and he also worked with Tianjin Pipe Group as head of new projects. The next panelist is Mr. Abhijit Mahanta. He's head ferrous European metal recycling, and he looks after India and Bangladesh. So Mr. Mahanta joined this outfit in the year 2001, and he was overseas, and then he returned to this part of the world to set up the Indian operations. He earlier worked with Tata Steel. And the European metal recycling is not just a trader, but it also has a recycling outfit, and it has been supplying ferrous scrap to India. So Mr. Mahanta has put in 21 years in the scrap business. The next panelist is Mr. Henry Liu. He is head of iron ore analytics at My Steel in China. He has over 18 years in the commodities business, and he's primarily been an analyst. His expertise is bulk commodities, base metals, and energy products. He earlier worked with Mirae Assets, Macquarie Bank, and McKinsey. The next speaker is Mr. Arshdeep Singh. He's Director, Vital Solutions Pte. Limited, based at Singapore. Vital Solutions is a Singapore-based trading company, and it supplies paper and steel via investments in supply chain linkages, financing, and long-term contracts. Mr. Singh was with Cargill for 14 years. He was the global trading head, and his expertise lies in global scrap and metallics. The next panelist is Ms. Nishtha Mukherjee. She is a general manager with iron ore and scrap at Steel Mint, India. And she has put in 6 years in iron and steel market, tracking this for analysis and news. She has been a speaker at platforms such as Asia Steel Forum, where she presented in 2019, and ISA Conclave, where she presented in 2019 again. She has a management degree in finance, and she's an engineer in electronics and telecommunications. Joining me also is Arthur Lee. He is a Steel Mint's representative in China, and he is going to help us with some of the conversations today to help translate it. And I am Ruchira Singh. I'm a journalist. I'm based in India, and I have been tracking the metal and the mining industry from my base for a while now. So I'd like to welcome all of you panelists. Thank you very much for your time today. And I'd also like to welcome a lot of the participants who have joined us today. Thank you very much for registering. And for your benefit, I'd like to explain the flow of this webinar. So we first have 3 presentations coming from Nishtha, Mr. Henry Liu, and Mr. Tao, which is going to help set the base for this webinar. We'll get to know more about where things stand. And after that, we'll have a Q&A session between myself and the panelists. And after that, audience, it's going to be your turn. So you could put in your questions in the Q&A box, which you have down below on your screen. But I'd like to request you to wait until much of the discussions are over so that you don't end up asking what I may have asked. So we can get started now. Thank you very much, all of you. And the first presenter is Nishtha. So Nishtha, can we have all of your background and the data and the analysis that you know about the steel scrap market and also China's upcoming presence in it? Over to you, Nishtha.
Sure. Yeah, thank you so much. Please allow me to share my screen. Yeah, so hi everyone. I'll be talking about a quick recap of the global ferrous scrap market in 2020. First, let's start with the statistics of the key importing and exporting countries. So, if we see and talk about the importers, then yes, the Turkey, which again serves to be the benchmark for the global ferrous scrap market, has registered a sharp increase in its scrap import volumes this year, so far during Jan to October 20. And its import volumes have increased by 18%. Well, the reason behind it was the strong restocking that they were doing, backed by the strong steel demand. Of course, US, UK, Russia, they remained the key scrap suppliers to Turkey during the Jan to October period. And notably, Turkey's crude steel output has registered a year-on-year increase of 4% as per the World Steel Association data. And it seems that mills have been very actively restocking cargoes, and they have booked nearly 20-25 cargoes for Jan shipments, which they were trying to secure for their finished steel sales. Coming on to the next, South Korea, which has witnessed a sharp decline in its ferrous scrap imports this year. During Jan to October 20, it has seen a decline of about 34%. The reason that we learned was the maintenance outages at majority of the mills over there, which lowered the demand for scrap, and of course the preference for domestic scrap, which lowered down the imports. Coming down to India, yes, India has also seen a decline in its ferrous scrap import volumes this year, because domestic scrap and other substitutes like DRI remained a preference. Also, as you all must be aware that UAE and South Africa had imposed scrap export bans earlier, which led to less offers and limited availability, resulting in a decline in the Indian scrap import volumes. If we talk about particularly for UAE, then India imported just 0.5 million tons of scrap from UAE during Jan-September period, which was 0.8 million ton in the corresponding period last year. But yes, apart from these countries, we have seen a sharp increase in the scrap import volumes from Vietnam, which is turning out to be a benchmark for the Southeast Asian nation. With import volumes of nearly 5.2 million tons since CY19, this year too, Vietnam has continued to ramp up its steel production. After pandemic, there was a pent-up demand, and there was increased inquiries of Vietnam origin billets from China, which resulted in an increased imports of ferrous scrap. Also, its steel production has increased roughly by 30% during the Jan to October 20, which signals a positive economy and a positive GDP growth as well. And the construction and manufacturing sectors are also quite picking up in a good pace over there, resulting in a good demand for ferrous scrap. Now let's have a look at the key scrap exporting countries. You can see in the figures, EU and USA both have observed a decline in their scrap export volumes this year. Lower scrap collection rates because of pandemic, second wave of pandemic, there were the reasons that were understood for the lower scrap availability, and hence resulting in lower exports. However, difference to it is the Japanese ferrous scrap exports, which have increased significantly this year so far. This was because of the strong buying seen from countries like Vietnam and Bangladesh. But although there was a rapid increase in ferrous scrap exports so far this year from Japan, we expect that the export volumes will come down in November and December, considering sharp increase in domestic scrap prices in Japan. So we can expect a downturn in the ferrous scrap export volumes this month. Now coming down to the price trends. Turkey imported scrap prices have hit 8 years high, touching 450, 455 CFR levels for HMS. Following the same trend, we have seen South Asian markets like India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh also registering sharp increase in offers. In India also, prices have hit 8 years high. However, if we talk to the trade sources and the importers who are regularly importing scrap, they say that Indian importers have turned a bit hesitant and resistant to the sharp increasing offers and prefer to wait and watch for the further changes till the time they are focusing on the domestic scrap and domestic substitutes of sponge iron, because they are comparatively cost effective. Well, next, Pakistan has kept itself away from the bulk imports because of lesser availability of bulk cargoes, and they have remained active in the containers market. But yes, again, towards the end of last week, with scrap prices soaring high, we have heard trades getting slowed down there as well. Coming on to Bangladesh, Bangladesh mills have remained quite active in booking bulk scrap cargoes, and they have been doing it from US, Japan, Australia, and all these countries. But yes, they are restocking it because of to secure supplies and also in as an outlook of good demand in the coming months. Now, you can see that even Chinese domestic scrap prices have been rallying. And I hear that today, again, there has been a further increase. So that seems because of the increasing steel prices and tight availability, of course. Talking about the Japanese scrap prices, if we look at the export price trend, the monthly Kanto scrap export tender of Japan registered a sharp hike of $77, $78 in the month of December. So that was almost a 10-year high level that we heard so. And yes, it was because of the active demand from Vietnam that was coming up, which resulted in sharp hike in bids. And after that, you know, the offers have increased to 42,000 Japanese yen levels. So there we see a sharp increase in the export offers. Tracking the export offers, we have seen a successive price hikes by the domestic mills in Japan as well. Tokyo Steel by far has raised prices by 8 times in December itself, and we expect that the prices will increase further. Now, yes, the theme of our webinar, that how will the new scrap standards in China impact the scrap market as well as the iron ore market. Considering if the figures of the last few years, we have seen that the China's iron ore import volumes have consistently increased. Like, say, for example, it was roughly 1040 million tons in CY16, which increased to 1070 million tons in CY19. But if we see the ferrous scrap import volumes, they have come down sharply from roughly 2 million ton levels in CY16 to just 0.2 million tons in CY19. So that was basically because of the ban imposed on the ferrous scrap imports in China. So there are many questions which all the industry participants are really looking forward for clarity, that how the new reforms in China impact the global scrap trade, And the biggest question is that, will it displace iron ore? Will it impact the iron ore import volumes in China? So before I end my presentation, that's a brief on the Steelman's coverage on global ferrous scrap that we cover around 12 countries with detailed market insights. And we have recently revamped our monthly report on ferrous scrap. So in case you want to subscribe to it, you can definitely dial in the numbers mentioned in my presentation. So that was all from my end that I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Nishtha. So your presentation shows that prices are looking upwards. All the big changes, the reforms coming in China may have a big bearing. Lots of questions over there. Well, we could see that a scrap generation is falling in the US and EU. However, Japan doing well. Vietnam, the new entrant in the scrap business. So all of those things were there in your presentation. Thank you for that. And I'd now like to invite Mr. Henry Liu to give his presentation on the scrap market. Mr. Liu?
Yes, just 1 minute. I will start sharing my screen. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining this webinar. Thanks to Steelman to organize this conference. And today, my presentation will pretty much focus on China's scrap import policies, how will it change market dynamics. Because we got Mr. Tao from China as well, I think he will have more insights about the current policy changes. And I will quickly go through the policy changes. Tao probably will have more imports. And the first, I think China is expected, we are expecting in the first quarter of next year, China will resume the scrap imports. And but the scrap has been renamed as the recycled steel materials. And with a new published national standard that will come in place in the beginning of 2021. And yes, our topic will, my topic will focus on the impact of the scrap price. I will show a couple of slides. First, as we just mentioned in the previous speaker presentation about these Chinese scrap imports by sources, you can see now 3 stages. And the second stage was Japan was quite strong. But even in the third stage, I agree, Japan remains quite strong for the scrap exports. And but for China, you can see this is the breakdown of the monthly scrap imports by different country. But I have to remind you, in the middle of 2019, actually Chinese government shut down the import of the scrap. So there's only very small amount of scrap being imported into China. But the remain, we can see Japan remains the largest scrap export to China. And this is typically what we can see due to the policy change. China's scrap imports came to a halt in the middle of 2019. And probably I just repeat the slides here. And you can see recently the price gap between Chinese domestic market and the overseas main exporting market has narrowed, thanks to the very faster rising iron ore price and the scrap price as well. And I have to mention a little bit about the billet, because I think we do have a question before the seminar regarding the billet imports. Yes, for the billet imports, you can see from this chart, let's move to this chart first. You can see the semis import in China actually has been very aggressive in 2020. because China shut down the scrap imports in 2019. So the Chinese steel mills and the huge pressure of the demand increase start to import semis in 2020. The semi imports has increased by nearly 1,000% on year-to-year basis. And between June and September, China became a net steel importer after 11 years of net steel exporter. And but for this table, you can see basically China, the imports of the semis make China became a net steel import over the past between the June and September over the 4 months period. And this is just a quick breakdown overview about what actually happened in China about the scrap market. But I have the following comments about the Chinese steel scrap market. This year, we apparently suffer a scrap shortage of supply in China. There are three main reasons. Number one is the demand of the scrap has increased in China, especially for the state-owned steel mills who are increasingly increase their scrap inputs in their blast furnace converter steelmaking process. According to my steel data, by the end of 2019, the state-owned steel mills scrap input has increased to 20% compared with 10% in 2017 and 2018. And secondly, if you remember the famous structure, the supply side structure reform started in 2017, the Chinese steel sector and the petrochemical sector they have undergone a series of policy changes. During that 2 years, a lot of factories are being dismantled and being relocated into the inland region. So in 2017 and 2018, there were a lot of scrap being generated from these old factories. However, this structure, this supply side reform basically it's moved to a new stage in 2019. So in 2020, we are seeing less scrap being generated by this old factory relocation. And thirdly, the most important factor is, of course, about the shutdown of the scrap imports. So due to these three reasons, we are suffering a huge scrap supply shortage in 2019. And the third point is regarding what is the impact about the resumption of scrap imports on the iron ore demand. I just give you a very simple number. If you have a look at this number, you can see the highest scrap imports occurred in China is in 2009. During that year, China imported nearly 14 million tons of scrap. Pretty much that was the record high imports. Before China shut down the scrap imports, there's only roughly 2 million tons of scrap import in 2019 and 2018. And we are assuming if China starts resuming the scrap imports, the most likely scrap import volume for the first year will be around 6 to 7 million tons, 6 million tons to 7 million tons, because China has set a very strict quality standard for scrap imports. So in that case, 6 million to 7 million tons scrap imports plus 12 million tons to 15 million tons domestic incremental scrap supply, we estimate next year, which could offset the iron ore imports by 30 million tons in 2020. And but if we are assuming China could import in a high case scenario, 12 million tons of scrap, plus 12 to 15 million tons domestic incremental scrap supply, which could offset 40 million tons of iron ore import in 2020. But for the first year, we don't think China could import that much of scrap. We believe 6 to 7 million tons is the more reasonable range for the first year scrap imports. So we are still saying probably for at least 6 to 7 million tons import, which could offset about 10 million tons of iron ore imports, plus 12 to 15 million tons domestic incremental scrap supply, which could offset another 20 million tons of iron ore imports in 2020. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that's the part of my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Liu. So we note the rewording in the policy, from scrap imports, the government has changed its perspective perhaps by calling it recycled scrap materials. Mr. Liu is predicting a 6 to 7 million ton imports of scrap next year, coupled with 12 million tons of domestic scrap generation. And all of this put together has the capacity to replace approximately 30 million tons of iron ore imports of China. So a lot is changing really in this country. We note that after 11 years of being a net steel exporter, China has turned into a net importer between June and September of this year. So thank you for those pointers, Mr. Liu. And I would now like to ask Mr. Tao to give his presentation. You're very close to the policy making process, I believe, because Kamu has advised the government from what I hear. So do let us know more about the new scrap import policy of China and whatever else you might have to add about this market. Mr. Tao.
Okay. First, thanks for Steelmate giving me this chance. And just now, Mr. Liu introduced the scrap market of China. And now, more about police in China.
Okay, we'll wait until
Sorry.
Right, so there's your screen, Mr. Tao, yes.
Mm-hmm. Sorry.
Not a problem. Please take your time. So another important, right, please go ahead, Mr. Tao. I'm about to add something else, which I caught in Mr. Henry's presentation. But yes, we can see your screen now. So please go ahead with your presentation.
Can you see this PPT?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Sorry. I might speak more about the police in China. About six aspects. The first is new trends emerged in international trade of steel scrap. The second is the relatively low utilization rate of China's scrap in China. The third is the import of recycled steel raw material is a hot topic in industry. The fourth is the national standard on recycled steel raw material rolled out. Fifth is the price trends of steel scrap in China market 2020. The sixth, the threshold of steel scrap processing industry. The sixth envisaged direction of China's steel scrap industry. New trends emerges in international trade of steel scrap. The recently released market report by BIR highlighted the steel scrap flow on the global scale with increased diversity. While steel scrap takes up more than half of the ferrous feed in USA, Japan, and EU countries, many developing countries hope to utilize steel scrap through import to set up new steel making capacity. Among them, Turkey, India, and Vietnam essentially account for about 1/3 of the world steel scrap import. From August 2019, China stopped importing of steel scraps, responsibly it to a country with virtually no scrap import.
Mr. Tao, sorry to interrupt, but do you have more slides? Your presentation doesn't seem to be moving because I can see that you have listed. Yes, now we have the next slide. So thank you for that. And if you can make it full screen, it'll be helpful.
Okay. According to the estimate of CAMU, the total output of steel scrap in 2019 was 240 million tons, up to 20 million tons, or 9% year-over-year. The import of steel scrap among mills and CAMUs totally was 0. The steel scrap utilization rate in China is still at low level compared with global average. During the 5-year plan period, the scrap utilization rate in China improved notably, but still lags behind the global level. It is still overshadowed with much potential to be tapped compared with developed countries, which has caught attention government and CISA. Three, the import of recycled steel raw material is a hot topic in the industry. Recycled steel scrap has been on the spotlight since the second half of 2018. Four government authorities, including Ministry of Ecology and Environment, jointly issued notice on adjusting the entry for imported scraps, which required the solid scrap include steel, copper, and aluminum, previously on the list of raw materials as solid scrap, a note for import to be incorporated in the list of solid scraps as raw material substitutes restricted from import, and to realize zero import of those solid scraps by the end of 2020. Actually, the steel scrap import was halted since August 2019. On December 17 and December 17, news from CISA had it that the national standard on recycled raw material or steel making has been released and will be implemented from January 1st, 2021. This standard will fully tap on the potential of steel scrap accessible both inside China and abroad. The current national standard on steel scrap is not longer suitable for imported quality steelmaking raw materials. The enactment of recycled steelmaking raw materials will prove support for utilization scrap resource both domestically and abroad. For the national standard on recycled steel raw material rolled out. At present, the global trading volume of steel scrap is about 100 million tons, of which international trading in EU is about 20 million tons. Except for EU, the key exports are USA and Japan, with the former exporting about 15 million tons and the latter about 8 million tons annually. Irreversibly, 18% of imported steel scraps to China was from Japan. Sorry. The national standard on recycled steel raw material rolled out. 1. The coordinated on September 23, 2020. Mr. Chu Chi-wen, head of sub-military department, chaired the coordination meeting for national standard recycled steelmaking raw material. to the launching conference held on October 13, held in Shanghai, and drafting commenced. 3. Plan to formula standard officially on October 16. For meetings aimed at pushing for the standard held in Beijing on November 19th, on November 9th. 5. Standard get approved at a session meeting on November 29. 6. On December 4th, state administration for market regulation standard administration approved to release standard and impelled it for
Mr. Tao, can I, sorry to interrupt, Mr. Tao,
okay.
can you please make your presentation go to full screen? We are getting a lot of people from the audience asking us to make your presentation on the full screen mode.
Okay. Sorry. For the price trends of steel script in China market 2020, and this just now Mr. Liu introduced in detail, so I can't speak it. 6. The threshold of steel script processing industry. Since 2012, when Ministry of Industry and Information Tech issued the threshold for steel script processing, there are 7 batches of 409 companies approved, assessed but 30 later revoked. Leaves 379. The initial industry layout for script processing and delivery has been established with an annually processing capacity of 110 million tons, taking up more than 5% of recycled scrap on the market. At present, the 8 batches of 100 companies approved access is being inspected on site. Companies approved in the first 6 batches will be reviewed to check out disqualified. According to the industry of MIIT, industry threshold will be the higher during the 4th 5-year plan period. The industry should be based on leading steel mills so as to expand the business size, improve industrial concentration, the interpreter of the script separately, collection, processing, classification, and application will be part of the 4th 5-year plan. Together with the industry's threshold, effort should be made on standard compliance training, and forestry leading companies, as well as environment protection and improve steel scrap quality. 7. Envisage direction of China's steel scrap industry. A ton of steel using steel scraps can save 1.7 tons of iron ore concentrates, reduced 1.6 tons of carbon dioxide emissions, and 3.4 tons of solid waste discharged. To increase the use of scrap can effectively reduce the consumption of iron ore, reduce the reliance on iron ore, and safeguards the raw material supply for the industry. Recently, there are 3 pieces of news light up the steel scrap industry. 1. High-profile officials of state council held a meeting to discuss the measures in response to the precarious imported raw material and touched upon the utilization of steel scrapers of both inside China and abroad within the framework of national security. To the latest September, 3 top numbers of CPPCC invited MIIT Ministry of Economic and Environment, CISA, CAMU, Ship Recycling Association, and some experts to conduct special research on steel scrap recycling and usage in Jiangsu and Guangdong province, and came up with special report on speeding up steel scrap recycling and
Mr. Tao, could you also change the slide and move to the slide from where you've been talking? And also we have limited time, so maybe another few slides would be helpful.
Okay. So
对，陶总，您记着那个画一下那个 PPT， 然后你按一下 F5，是不是能够全屏啊？
刚才那个传不了屏，我马上就讲完了，我就马上讲完了，它这种。
I see a slide on the price moves. Do you think we could see that one, Mr. Tao? There is a graphic.
So my speech is just now over. sorry. Okay, 3. China's chapters of commerce of metallurgical enterprise and SRI have started research on tax relating to steel scrap and will give advices to current tax-related police expertise estimated and steel accumulated by 2030.
陶总，我打扰一下，陶总。
我已经讲了。
哦，是啊，我看你这个 PPT 好像没有在那页上。哦。
Okay, so
Mr. Tao, can I request you to show your slide number 14, which has a graphic? And then I'm afraid we'll have to end it there.
OK，那个李总你说一下吧，我讲完了，不好意思，我因为英语不太好。
Oh, Mrs.
Okay.
Ruchela, Mr. Tao has finished his PPT. So I think after this webinar, we can share this PPT with our audience. Is that okay?
Okay.
Hello?
I think there is some technical issue at Ruchira ma'am's end. So I think, yes, we can do that, Mr. Lee. We can share the presentation of Mr. Tao later again with the audience for their easy understanding. Will that be fine?
Yes, yes. We can share with the audience after this webinar.
Fine, fine. So now, since we have finished with our presentations, now we shall move ahead with the views of from Mr. Arshdeep Singh and Mr. Abhijit Mahanta, that how they feel that with new revision of Chinese scrap policies would impact the global scrap and billet trade flow. So, Mr. Mahanta.
Yeah, hi. It's wonderful that Steel Mint has picked up a topic which is so much in time, and like you always do, you have always been very, very topical, and thank you for inviting me today. Global scrap trade evolves so fast and so much, it is actually a bit difficult to predict things going forward. I distinctly recall about 2 years back in one of your own seminar, and we had massive discussions on how China is going to be a global scrap exporter. And most of the discussions that time was focused on the growing exports of Chinese scrap and how things changed in 2 years' time. There will be a lot of factors, lot of developments which will influence. We will have to see how and where the influence is going to hit the most. Insofar as imports into Southeast Asia is concerned, I believe that both Pakistan and India are not going to be so much affected in the short term as much as perhaps Bangladesh will be. I think Japan is going to be looking to export more and more to China, and in 2020 so far, I have tracked the Bangladesh bulk imports, and almost 20 to 25% month on month is coming from Japan now. In fact, in November arrival, October arrival, the percentage was even higher. It was, I believe, over 30%. Therefore, and also Pakistan is, as you know, predominantly a shredded bulk importer, and Japanese shredded is a very, very premium product. So I haven't heard of any Japanese scrap coming to Pakistan in bulk. And India is also not a regular importer from Japan, but Bangladesh is. And in current container situation where the logistical challenges are mounting, several mid-sized Bangladeshi importers are also now looking to import from Japan in smaller 10 to 15,000 ton cargoes. So all these buyers will be affected in the short term. That's my view. Also, the US West Coast exporters, they would prefer to perhaps ship to China than come further ahead and sail to India or Bangladesh. Having said that, a lot of trade these days is influenced by geopolitical developments, and we do not really know how the China and US relations are going to play out with the new regime coming in. So we'll also have to keep an eye on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm sorry I went offline for a bit. Mr. Tao, can I ask you a bit about the China policy that is coming into play? Your presentation detailed a lot of the efforts that took place and the many meetings that the government had to put in this new policy to, give shape to it. Are we to believe that the new steel recycling material import policy will come into play in January, which is next month? So my question, quite simply, is the new scrap import policy coming into play from January, which is next month?
陶总，他就是说，是不是这个政策从明年1月就开始？
Yes, 是的 yes.
It is officially out, which means the trade can go ahead and do their negotiations.
这是那个 the national standard on recycled steel raw material， 这是一个国家标准，它是就是再生钢铁的国家标准，是从明年1月1号开始执行。但是那个就是进口政策放开，还没有确定的消息的。
Yeah.
你帮我翻译一下吧。
哦。 Yeah, that is the national standard. It will be taking effect from January 1st. 你说是进口政策还没有放开？
对，进口政策还没有确定下来，这只是再生钢铁原料的国家标准发布了，这是从明年1月1号开始发布这个国家标准。
It is only the standard, approved by the authorities, but the actual import will be still to be seen. Because this opening is still to be granted. It's only the policy has been enacted and issued.
还需要时间，还需要时间的。
When will the policy? When will the policy be opened? Which means, from when can the actual imports start taking place?
Mrs. Your voice is breaking. Can you come again?
When can traders start importing the material as per this new policy?
陶总，他就是说，这个什么时候就根据这个政策，大概什么时候才能够就是说，真正的开始这种贸易？
这个政策还没有出台之前，都是一种猜测。现在不好说。按正常的话，以这个国家标准，就是出台之后，它会给这个就是进口啊，就是有一道口子，有一道口子会有一个过程。因为政策性的东西，它往往都是一个有很多时候就是一个随机性的。我估计也许3个月，也许半年。但是不会太长，不会太长时间。
It's still something to be decided, because this is but it won't be too long. Should be around 3 to 5 months.
Okay, so like 3 to 5 months. Yeah. So no imports can take place before mid of 2020 then. Arthur, can you ask him to clarify?
Sometimes I can't hear you.
Okay, I'll try again.
Your lips are moving, but I can't hear clearly. Yeah.
Okay, Arthur. So 3 to 4 months from January is when the actual imports can start taking place.
Yeah, that's just a guess.
It's
yet to be determined. Yeah, it's a guess.
Okay. Okay, last question for Mr. Tao before I move to the other panelist is, can the trade start negotiating deals starting from now?
Can the trade start from now?
Yes, can they start to negotiate the import contracts starting from now?
No, I think Mr. has already explained, this, we have already got the policy approved, but for the actual practice is still need time. So for the time being, we can't start the trading anytime soon.
Okay, thank you so much.
Maybe 3 to 5 months later.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you so much for that clarification. I'll move on to Mr. Arshdeep Singh. Mr. Singh, you know. So what is the trade doing? Are they excited about this new policy, and are they doing their deals, preparing for 3 to 4 months from now when China could be buying some of scrap material?
First of all, thank you very much. You're being very kind. I don't really know things at the back of my hand, but in any case, I'll try. Of course, the suppliers are very excited, and if China enters any market, creates a lot of ferment, and in the current scenario, the market's already so bullish. So this is another very bullish factor. Now, if it's going to be 4 to 5 months before clarity is achieved and participants sort of enter to buy, then I don't think things will change too much in the immediate term. However, this is certainly a bullish factor. China, even if they come in to import 6 to 7 million tons in the first year, in year one, there's like 500 to 600,000 tons a month. That is a significant volume and will be very supportive of the market. We need to see the fine print of the policy as to what comes out from China in terms of what can be imported, what can't be imported. So one is that. Secondly, when China has been importing ferrous scrap in the earlier days, they've been preferring to buy the higher value-added grades. The PNS grade, the busheling grade, the shred grade, and not so much the lower grades like the HMS, the H2 HMS, because I believe it's been like that before, that there's been enough domestically available, and so they're focused on the higher grades. So that needs to also sort of needs to be determined as to what grades will really attract them to come and buy. Currently, the domestic markets, if we talk about Japan, if we talk about US, the domestic steel markets are buying domestic scrap. There's more of a bullishness on the flat products rather than the long products at this point in time, be it US, be it Japan, and so on. The HRC prices are at very, very strong levels. So are rebar prices, but the HRC prices are the ones which are really skyrocketing. So there's more of a demand by the blast furnaces, because these are the ones which are largely producing the flat products. Blast furnaces to buy the higher grade scrap, which is the PNS and also the shred and some busheling. So there will be, if China steps in and wants to buy the higher grade scrap, then of course the higher grade, the gap between the lower grade and the higher grade scrap will probably increase. But again, we need to sort of determine what really the Chinese buyers would want, what really the Chinese mills will want. If it's the blast furnaces which step in, I mean, it's the blast furnaces will prefer the higher grade scrap, and we'll need to see how that sort of pans out. However, having said that, if China does enter, of course, is very, very supportive of the market.
Right. Thanks for that. So possibility is that China will be importing higher grade scraps. And also, if you note, Mr. Tao's presentation spoke about a rewording. So they call it not scrap. So we will, yes, need to see what the specifications are. Mr. Mahanta, does this excite the European Metal Recycling Organization? Would you be able to generate this kind of high grade scrap material which is anticipated, and will it be easy to ship it to Chinese ports from Europe?
First of all, we are one of the largest processors. Therefore, the capability to produce any grade is not something that eludes us. Having said that, these higher grades, which Arshdeep also very clearly mentioned, like the bushellings or P&S, a lot of it is actually a factor of industrial production. So bushellings, for example, or all kind of neat production scrap, they are directly correlated to the factory productions. So if European factories post-pandemic, start producing at their normal levels, then for sure we will get the normal flow of all kinds of higher grades of material. That's not a problem for us. Europe, due to the freight factor, has never been the largest exporter to China. If you see geographically, US West Coast and Japan are the best suited to export to the Chinese ports. But it will open up new avenues for us in other markets. If you look back 2 years, 3 years back, European suppliers were the most active players in the Indian subcontinent. The Bangladesh market and India, for example, was dominated by European suppliers. When I started EMR in India for after that 4 or 5 years, there were no American supplies at all. It was all European supplies. And therefore, I believe that once China starts, and if a larger part of Japanese and US West Coast material find their way to China, then obviously the other markets will have to realign their import strategies and perhaps look at other sources like us. Therefore, for sure, new avenues will open up for us. May not be in China, but in definitely other markets.
Right, thank you for that. So European Metal Recycling is also excited about this move and can definitely cater to this changing world. And before I move on for my next question, I'd like to ask the participants if they see the world scrap market and the world steel market also changing significantly. And on your chat box, if you could put in just some trends that you see in the recycling business and the steel business that you might see from next year. Do put in a line there so we can spot that and read back in this webinar. Right, so I'll move on to Mr. Henry Liu. Mr. Liu, please tell us what is your analysis of how the global scrap market will change next year?
And okay, and I think because this year, because the iron ore price has increased so much, so it's very difficult for the Chinese steel mills. I don't think it's just for Chinese steel mills, even for steel mills in other countries. And I think to allow the scrap imports again is pretty much some measures to cool off the iron ore price in China. But as I just said in the beginning of this presentation, we estimate only 6 to 7 million tons of scrap will be imported into China. So in that cases, I don't think this will significantly change in the supply and demand balance in the global market for the first year. But it's hardly to say what could happen in the future years. Because I think one speaker mentioned that China actually has its own scrap supply. And some people even predict probably in 5 or 10 years, China could start exporting the scrap to the global market. But for the time being, looks like China really needs some scrap. So for the first year, we have to be patient because some of your speaker mentioned, I totally agree. the standard set for the import scrap has been very strict at this moment. And it's very different from the scrap because we rename it as a recycled steel materials. It's not just a name change. It's also about the standard. So we are talking about a very strict standard, and I think the Chinese government has set a series of quality check procedures, including radioactive procedures, radioactive check, including the impurity check, and also they have a very strict classification of different kind of scrap imports. And so in that case, I don't think China will import whatever China want, but pretty much high quality scrap for China. So in the first year, I don't think there will be a great change in the global supply demand side, but definitely it would be a good news for the global scrap market in terms of the price, but probably it's not a good news for steel mills.
All right, so comments coming in from the audience. Albert Jan is saying that as a terminal operator, I see a lot of opportunities. And Mahesh Kedia is saying, we have heard that Europe is planning to ban the scrap exports. That's actually a question. We'll take it up soon. But I will move back to Mr. Singh. There's one important question we have, which is, can Japan fill into this requirement of China's? Can Japan be a potential scrap supplier to China? How is its market? We saw from Nishtha's presentation that it is generating enough scrap. How much of that could actually land into China? Mr. Singh? You need to unmute yourself, Mr. Singh.
I said, thank you. I said, theoretically speaking, all of Japan's exports could end up in China. I mean, if you're talking about 6 to 7 million tons in the first year and thereafter more than that, and proximity-wise, Japan being the nearest to China, I mean, on paper, all of Japan's exports could land up there. But so yeah, Japan is going to be when China has been importing earlier. Japan has been a major exporter to China, and would be the first one affected by this additional demand.
Are any deal talks taking place already between Chinese exporters and Japanese exporters and Chinese importers? Are you getting any requirement calls from anywhere?
We are getting some requirements, but I mean it's still pretty hazy. It's not really not real tangible kind of inquiries. Just seeking out price ideas and giving some sort of requirements, but it's not totally. They also know that there's still a lot of things which need to be nailed down. So it's just back and forth of price ideas, nothing really tangible.
And moving to Mr. Mahanta, I'd like to know from you, the data shows that scrap generation has fallen. And indeed, that might be because of the pandemic, because it has really slowed down the whole business and people have been busy doing, with healthcare, etc. So what is some kind of a forecast that you might have for generation of scrap from Europe, which is actually one of the largest markets going forward in year 2021?
Yeah, I will actually tell you from UK's perspective, because EMR is a dominant player in UK. The pandemic has really slowed down the collections. If you see, our bread and butter business is shredded and HMS, and both are heavily dependent on door-to-door collections, municipality collections, council collections, and so on and so forth. All these have drastically suffered this year, and when we were hoping that the things would be looking up, now you can see the 4th-tier restrictions have been put in from yesterday. And in many of the councils, in many of the counties, even the daytime movements of hauliers have been stopped. So movement of trucks and logistics have really affected us. The new production material flow is also less because some of the industries and foundries were closed for a while, and when they were just opening up and new restrictions have come in now. The good news is that the vaccine rollout is being planned in an organized way, and perhaps that will help us in going back to the previous cycles, January, February onwards. In any case, December, January are tough months for recyclers because of the winter conditions.
Right. So the vaccine might, bring things back to normal. Mr. Mahanta, one question I have is, what about behavioral changes with the economy having gone through such a bad time and looks like it may not recover very, very quickly? So have there been some kind of, behavioral changes, as in, do people want to use their white goods and their automobiles to death before they actually bring it out in the scrap market?
The end of life vehicle rules were also there for other products, like white goods and railways and buildings and all that. But we have seen whenever the economies go through a transition, a tough time, then these periods, these time limits, they sort of stretch. When people were in good times in UK, for example, people would be recycling their vehicles in 7.5 years. Perhaps now, like you rightly said, it will stretch to 9 years, 10 years. Yes, that affects a generation as well, and that is also a factor of such a pandemic, and therefore this has affected our inflows into the yards. Having said that, if you see the buying behavior of the people everywhere after the pandemic, the buying of the white goods has actually shot up in countries like Bangladesh. In 2-3 months, they sort of emptied out their entire stock of washing machines and refrigerators. And in India, perhaps dishwashers are the hottest selling commodity these days. Therefore, we also see more and more demand coming from those industries. And in Europe, if some things go wrong, people do not repair it; they just replace it. And therefore, I think the behavioral pattern will change. But the moment the vaccine is in place, and I think there is some kind of positivity back in the market, people will be back to their old habits again. So I do not really see a behavioral change impacting our business so much.
Okay, I'll move to Mr. Liu. Mr. Liu, do you think there will be behavioral changes and slower scrap generation continuing in EU and US for a while in India, Bangladesh, and all of this region, more of white goods are purchased? Do you think that scrap generation will continue to be slower in Europe and US?
I think it's quite simple. It's back to the price, because we believe the price, once the square price, for example, research, and basically it says once the price reach above $400 US dollar per ton, will encourage more scrap generation. So I pretty much, I think it's all back to the price. To the imported scrap, the overseas market scrap price dropped sharply. So I don't think it's a good incentive to generate more scrap in this, especially in developed countries. But I think it's the scrap price is not just because China reopened the door for the scrap import. It's also because of the low material price increase right now. So we're talking about annual price increase. We're talking about copper price increase. So this round of commodity price increase, I think will encourage more scrap generating in other countries.
Okay, thank you. And before I move to next questions, which are, I'd like to request to ask her question.
Yeah. I would like to ask a question on the container freight, which has been also a hot topic apart from the scrap availability. So, Mr. Mahanta, do you see like a further increase in container freight rates? Because we have been hearing quite about it, that they have shot up, and what is the reason behind, a sharp hike in container freight rates?
Good question, Nishtha. Actually, it's a question which is very difficult to answer. There are multiple factors which have put container businesses under stress. The first thing I think is that in the second half of this year, most of the shipping lines, they were afraid of the trade volumes dropping, so they did not order new containers like they always do. So in the second half of 2020, new container orders was very, very less. And therefore, the new containers did not get back into the system to replace the older recycled, scrappable containers. Second thing is that in the month April onwards, there were lots of exports of PPEs and bulk drugs into US and European countries. A lot of containers reached there. However, big importing nations like India and Indian subcontinent, they reduced their imports. So the number of containers that should have come back to India and emptied here and should have been available for exports reduced. Therefore, there has been a huge imbalance of availability of containers where they are needed and where they should have gone. To make matters worse, in UK, as I told you, the haulier situation made things very, very difficult. Now, about 3-4 weeks back, there were over 40,000 empty containers in the port of Felixstowe. But they were not reaching the northeast part of the country where they were badly needed. The scrapyards have the material ready, but there were no containers available for shipment because the empties were not coming out of Felixstowe. And the shipping lines, they were afraid that if they bring more vessels and with that more empties, it will only add up to the problem. So they simply started canceling the voyages. Now, once they start canceling the voyages, even the containers which are already loaded and ready for exports, they had no place to go. So this problem has only become worse and worse. And now I have heard that many shipping lines have canceled voyages altogether till end of February. For example, between Hong Kong and South China, there are some routes between Singapore and Singapore and Europe. And even this container, trouble has affected US West Coast and Taiwan trade, because a lot many containers suddenly went to the grain trading, where the shipping lines prefer to place their containers, which is a clean and nice, commodity to move around. So all these factors put together have affected the availability of containers for scrap trade. And I certainly believe this is not going to be over till at least Chinese New Year, because in Chinese New Year, again, a lot of containers will be stuck within China, and which will only add to the increase in freight.
Right. Thanks so much, sir.
Thank you. So before I move on to the audience questions, I just have one last question of mine, and this is on price forecast. And Mr. Tao, can I please ask you what kind of a price you see for the scrap shipments in 2021? And if you can give it to us in dollars, it would be very helpful. Dollars per ton. You need to unmute yourself, Mr. Tao.
就是说这个让你预测一下这个明年的这个价格，飞钢的价格。如果说能有年的话最好。预测一下明年的价格。
我们从国内的形式来预测吧，我觉得这个可能刘先生他预测会更准一点，因为我们只是从宏观面和从国家的一个对这个原料的需求来判断，做个宏观的判断。因为今年年底整个的钢铁原材料在中国的话就出现了一种暴涨的趋势，这势必会带动废钢价格的上涨。那个 铁镜粉，我们以往的价格它是一天涨个5块钱、10块钱，都是很大的一个幅度了。现在是一天能涨100块钱。所以来讲的话，我们认为废钢的价格在年底这段时间价格波动也是会很大的。你帮我翻译一下吧，李总。
For Mr. Tao, as he is from Carmel, so can you hear me?
Yes, Arthur. Please tell us what he said.
Since he's from Carmel, he's the organization for providing the guiding policies for the industry. So he can only give us a rough idea. Since the end of this year, all the raw materials like coke and the iron ore concentrates, iron ore fans, they have registered a very notable hike. So this price change will drive up the finished steel's price. Like previously, the upswing of the iron ore only ranges from 5 to 10 RMB per ton, but now the price is just surging. So this will greatly push up the scrap price, particularly near the year end. But he didn't give an exact figure, but this is the trend. It will be just be surging.
Okay, thank you. So yes, the price looking up in China, though we can't get any specific numbers. So the figures that we are working with, we are looking at Turkey scrap prices, Turkey, which is the largest importer of scrap. So HMS grade going at $450 a ton CFR. And we also have the price from Japan, which is at 4,200 yen per ton, which translates roughly into $406 FOB for H2 grade. So against this benchmark that we have for now, can the other panelists give a price forecast? Maybe Mr. Arshdeep Singh, can you give us some kind of a price forecast or a band which you see prices moving in next year?
Right. This is a very difficult question, actually. First of all, on the Japanese prices, it's not 42,000 FOB anymore. That was post the Kanto Tetsugan tender, which is the benchmark tender, which brought in very strong prices. The prices moved up another $20 beyond that. So I would say the offers are just going berserk. Actually, we have offers which will translate to about 470, 475 CFR. Bangladesh, those kinds of numbers for the lowest grade, the H2 grade. So I mean, the prices are very strong in terms of offers from the suppliers. The buyers are very hesitant at this point in time to buy. I think those who are producing rebars are just not stepping forward to buy at those kinds of levels. However, mills which are producing, the value-added grades, forging quality steel and things like that, and which has some exposure. I mean, those go into, some parts of automaking and so on. They are able to pay these kinds of prices or close to them. So we've seen, selectively some mills start to pay up at these kinds of levels, maybe $10 below the current kind of levels at which the suppliers want to sell. The prices have gone up so much, as Mr. Lee from Mr. Lee just mentioned. Mr. Liu, he was talking about how high prices could potentially bring out all the scrap from anywhere. As long as the prices get paid up, scrap starts coming out. It's not a manufactured product, it's a generated product. So we need to be really careful about this scenario currently. The rebar mills are not able to pass on the very strong price increases of the raw material onto their end users. So they are resisting. And on top of that, at these kinds of prices, there's more scrap which will start coming out. It's winters in the US, but Japan is okay. It is regular sort of collection period as well. It's not really, winters don't affect Japan so much. There is more scrap which will start to come out. And on top of that, there are suppliers who are hoarding the material. There's quite a few suppliers who don't want to sell. So there's material which is being built up, which has not been sold. So I reckon in the immediate term, of course, there's still an upside, maybe a $20-30 upside, maybe in that kind of range, 10 to 20, 10 on the conservative side and 20 maybe, and it could surprise us all. I mean, today the iron ore is shot up to 175, like nobody expected that, and there's some incident in Brazil, and which is just very supported sort of raw materials market. Scrap could go up further in the immediate term, but we need to be very mindful that it could start coming off as quickly as well within a month's time or so on. We need to be mindful of how there's more scrap available currently, which needs to sell. And if product prices are not pushed, you have largely the mills which buy the scrap are rebar mills. If they're not really able to push forth these scrap prices down the line, then you could see some correction happen in a month's time or so on, when weather starts to improve a little bit.
Okay, so we are looking at a $20 to $30 upside. However, corrections could come in. Mr. Mahanta, how about you? Any kind of price forecast from you?
Ruchika, as sir, I am really hard pressed to give you any forecast. And if in the beginning of November you told me that Turkey's prices will jump by $180 in 1 month time, 1.5 months time, then I would only laugh at you. But it's really difficult to predict. Like Arshdeep said, that one needs to be very careful. Today, for example, only Turkey is the place where the long product manufacturers are able to pass on the increases to the buyers. Then today at 455, they are rebar to even at 460, because I have heard some deals from Baltic at 460 as well. And even at 460, they have a fantastic, very healthy margin of scrap to $170 from scrap to rebar, which is fantastic for them. And most of the rebar production is sold till March end, so they are only doing a little bit of spot trading now. And therefore, and as I said, if the container situation also persists, so US supplies to Taiwan will remain strong, the price, in terms of price. Therefore, for next at least 1.5 months, I see the strength remaining. And the supply dynamics themselves are changing. Till last month, South America is a big containerized exporter to Bangladesh, for example, and this month South America is heavily buying from US shredded. So the dynamics change so much and so fast, it is really difficult to predict.
I see. Thank you. Mr. Liu, what do you think? Dynamics are changing so quickly, and correction is being spoken about even though prices are quite high. What could spark a correction in the market? And also, what kind of forecasts do you have for scrap prices?
Yes, it's always difficult to predict the price change. But I just give you some rule. The price in China, actually it comes back to a very old challenging question: how do you price the scrap? And it's always a big challenge about, in academic and in practice. Because if you want to bench the scrap price in China, for my own research, I have to bench it against the rebar price as well as against the hot metal cost. So in that case, and I give you one benchmark right now. So if we are assuming the iron ore price is at $130 to $135, assuming this level, we're talking about rebar price in China is around $615, which is roughly 4,000 RMB per ton. But in that case, and there's some rule in China, so you just deduct 1,100 RMB from the rebar price, you can get the scrap price. So in that case, we are coming back to the scrap price at $450 per ton. So basically, we are talking about 615 US dollar per ton rebar. We are talking about 135 US dollar iron ore. So we get 450 US dollar a ton of scrap, heavy metal, HMS quality scrap. So in that case, it depends on where all these iron ore price will go, where all these rebar price will go. So it's come back to the Chinese demand. If we are assuming China will be the price setter for the scrap in next year, pretty much we need to look into how sustainability of the Chinese steel demand in 2021.
I see. Thank you. My another question I have before I take the audience question, something I missed asking is about the iron ore price outlook. Mr. Arshdeep Singh, do you trade iron ore as well? And can you tell how this commodity is tracking all of these developments and what's an outlook?
No, we don't trade physical iron ore, but we are present on the futures. We trade futures as a proxy hedge for the scrap. I mean, in terms of the real sort of in-depth understanding of the supply-demand scenario of iron ore, I wouldn't be the right person.
Mr. Liu, do you track iron ore, and can you tell how the prices will move?
It's very difficult because right now I agree with the previous speaker saying yes, right now it's a little bit difficult for the steel mill to pass on the cost hike of the iron ore as well as the scrap, and in China as well as the coke and the price increase to the end users right now because it's a winter season. It's low demand season in China because it's very cold outside, and in northern part of China, the construction activity is slowing down right now. And also in February, we are going to embrace the Chinese New Year. All this time are low demand season, but right now the market sentiment has been quite high, and a lot of people are counting on Chinese demand after the New Year, and so basically, I think right now the market remain quite confident about the iron ore price resilience of the iron ore price. But to be honest, it's getting increasingly difficult to pass on the cost to the end users. Because right now, even China's economy has been in a recovering model, in much better shape compared with other countries. But the recovery remain quite fragile. And so in that case, I don't think the iron ore price could maintain at such a high level for a very long time, especially when we are going to see a low demand season in January and February in 2021. But also it's very difficult to see the iron ore price drop below like 120 or 120 or 100, and that will be also be very difficult given utilization rate, hot metal output in China remain quite high and they remain quite aggressive.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, audience questions now. Do put in your questions in the Q&A box, participants, if you have anything. You can write down the name of the panelist if it's a targeted question. And also if you could give your name and your company name, it would be nice. One question from Mr. Mahesh Kedia, which has been there on the screen for a while now. We have heard that Europe is planning to ban scrap exports. Mr. Mahanta, is that true?
I haven't heard anything of that kind. And in any case, we are predominantly in UK, as I told you, and with the Brexit scenario in place, I do not know how European legislations are going to directly impact our operations in UK at least.
Okay, Brexit talks seem to be coming close to a conclusion. Will that affect the scrap business in any way?
Yes and no. Investments will definitely have to be realigned, and the currencies will play a big role. As you know, we all export in dollars, and our costing is in local currencies. And even the very beginning of Brexit was quite changed for us because the pound had fallen from 1.5 to 1.3 now. Therefore, yes, Brexit will have changes in terms of investments, but in terms of rules on export, I am not aware of anything yet.
I see. Okay. So here's a question from Mr. Anup Nair, and he's directed this at Mr. Liu, Mr. Henry Liu. So he's asking, would you please elaborate how you reach the figure of 6 to 7 million tons potential imports by China in 2021? What is your line of thinking or methodology that you have used?
Okay, just give you two numbers. The highest scrap import in China was in 2009. You can imagine back in 2009, if you're already in that industry, you can imagine 2009 how crazy was the iron ore price back in the time, how crazy was the freight time between the financial crisis, between the financial crisis. And so in 2009, we're talking about China import about 13.69 million tons of scrap back at that time. And after that, we're actually seeing the gradual decline of the scrap into China. And we set the new standard for the scrap import for next year, which will be very strict. As I mentioned, there will be quality check, radioactive check, impurity check, etc., etc. So basically, China will only import good quality scrap. And so in that case, I don't think China could reach 14 million ton net level. And why I come back to 6 to 7 million tons, because we still need some time to find the scrap sources in overseas countries, and because of the high standard. I give you one simple example. And during the high peak time of the Chinese scrap imports, we can import the auto bodies directly and as a kind of a scrap. But according to the new standard, it was banned. So you have to import processed scrap. So in that case, I don't think we can reach 14 million tons back to in 2009. So 6 to 7 million tons is in a reasonable range, given the high standard, given the price difference right now. But you are seeing the price gap, price spread between the Chinese domestic market and overseas market is narrowing very fast right now.
Right. Thank you. The next question is from Mr. Raj Shah, and he's asking, will these developments act as a catalyst for Indian recycling industry? Mr. Mahanta, can you take this question? What changes do you foresee in India in the recycling trade?
India's recycling trade going forward will, I think, depend a lot on government policies. And I have been hearing about this scrappage policy, for last 3-4 years. But until and unless the government actually takes a proactive role and brings it forward, the recycling industry is just waiting. So for, I'll give you an example. There are about 3 recycling units which have started in North India at least, and all the 3 are waiting for raw material, and they are in fact looking to import raw material to recycle, which is not the aim of these recycling industries. It is never going to work, and the economies will not work if we import raw material to recycle in India. Therefore, Indian recycling industry is totally dependent on government policies. What government envisages and how soon the scrappage policy is put in force. I do not think that even if India starts recycling, it is going to export into China. Perhaps the onshore units will start looking at Bangladesh as a potential destination, like we do for sponge iron. Yes, but India's own consumption is going to be so much that we need all the recycled material inside our own country.
Okay, there's a question from Albert Jan asking, will there be higher storage demand in Europe Will there be a shift in shipping scrap, containers, break bulk? That's the question. But I suppose he wants to know if the container trade can easily cater to any changes taking place in the scrap shipping market. Mr. Mahanta, that question has to be for you.
I didn't actually understand the question. Sorry, Ruchika.
He's asking, will there be higher storage demand in Europe? Does he mean more of hoarding? Does Europe hoard a lot of scrap material? And then the second question is, will there be a shift in the way, containers actually ship it out? Will they quickly be able to retune themselves to, move more of scrap?
If he's asking whether Europe will be shipping more in containers to China, that I'm not sure, because I do not know the container freight logistic market between China and the European scrap suppliers. Bulk, yes, but container I do not know. And container trade, as I told you earlier, is already under a lot of stress. So I do not really understand how container, is going to suddenly take over the bulk business, if that is what he means.
Okay, I hope we've been able to answer that question. Hafiz Rahman is asking how the manufacturers will align the increasing price of scrap. I mean, is it easy to increase the price of end products, rebars, billets, the way scrap price is increasing, particularly in India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan? So basically his question is, will this, the end product be able to pass on the rising prices of scrap? Mr. Arshdeep Singh, can you answer?
The toughest of the questions. Conventional wisdom says that, we are recovering from a pandemic. All markets are in a bad way, actually, with respect to real demand coming back on. And at this time, to expect a whole amount of restocking is taking place, and real demand is not really coming back on. It's more the apparent demand, which is coming back on. One can assume that this may not continue. The prices may not be, the steel mills may not be able to pass on the price increases after a point in time, and things would need to get back to more rational levels. But it's so difficult to predict, It's a very, very difficult market to sort of understand currently.
Iftikhar Ahmed is asking, when do we expect normal freight rates? Mr. Liu, can you answer this question if you track the freight market as well?
Sorry, I missed the question. What's the question?
Iftikhar Ahmed is asking, when do we expect normal freight rates? So freight rates have gone up. So possibly his question is linked to a correction. When do you think freight rates might correct and fall?
It depends on when we can get the COVID-19 under control globally. Because right now it's very simple, because containers is shipping out of China one way, on one-way traffic, never comes back. And that's why the flat steel price in China has increased so much, because people are crazy in making new containers in China. And so I think it's a very simple question. Once we get the COVID-19 under control, once the vaccine start working, and give a couple months, probably we are going to see some correction of the freight.
Okay, I have a question for Mr. Tao. We spoke about hoarding of scrap, and some of the panelists have said that there has been some hoarding. In China, are people hoarding scrap material?
Sorry, Mr. Lee, please translate for me.
Arthur, is there hoarding of scrap in China?
Sorry, I'm just back. Sorry.
Is there hoarding?
Sorry, I'm just back.
So my question is there a hoarding of scrap material prevalent in China?
It's a holding.
Hoarding as in stocking of scrap.
OK， 就是说中国有没有这个，就是说废钢有没有这个上市，就是在哪个地方上市？
不是，他是说现在有没有那个什么？现在有没有一些人囤着废钢不肯卖？现在有没有人在囤积居奇废钢？中国有没有贸易商在囤积居奇废钢？
废钢在国内来讲是一种流通的商品啊。现在来讲，因为国内的那个原材料市场现在很火爆，那个也不排除有的贸易商在囤积。但是我觉得现在就是国内的钢铁原材料，它整个的价格最近这段时间上涨的比较厉害。我想所有做这个贸易的都在挣钱，这样的话，这个市场现在很红火，很火爆。你帮我翻译吧。
As the the raw material including the scraps are very sought after material, so all the participants in this trade are earning lucrative profits. So it can't be ruled out that somebody is holding the material to wait for higher price. But as the material, they are very actively traded in the market. So maybe there are some people, they have the plan to hold.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's it. Okay.
Thank you. And here is my last question before I close this webinar. It is directed at you, Mr. Liu. Do you expect Chinese billet imports to come down?
Yes, I think so. Because the first issue, China became a net, as I mentioned, net steel importer between June and September, but then the trend reversed in October. And it looks like an overseas demand for steel is picking up. So it's quite unusual because China was the only high price steel market in the world between in the first and the early second half of 2020. So that's why China was able to import the billet on condition of the scrap import shutdown. So in that case, I believe China is not able to import that much of semi, given the overseas demand recovery. This is the first thing. The second thing is we did hear that some of the southeastern country import scrap to make it and then export it into China. So in that case, once China reopen the door for the scrap imports, it will not be economic for the southeastern country to do that again. So for these two cases, I believe at least we are going to see some decline of the semi imports into China in 2021.
Thank you very much for that. And I'm going to sum up this webinar and close it now. So the few pointers I got was that China is working on a new policy. A lot of deliberations have gone behind shaping more scrap, domestic scrap market, but approximately 6 to 7 million tons is what our panelists are looking at for the kind of appetite China may have to import scrap material. Also, the pointers are that China will need the high grade scrap and not the low grade ones, which can be used effectively. The potential is that it will displace about 30 million tons of iron ore that it needs. So China might reduce its imports of iron ore, which is pretty significant for all of the market. Regarding the prices, everything is looking north, surprising jumps in all of the scrap prices. And of course, as a result, the whole steel complex. However, corrections could come. They are anticipated. And China, by the time it releases a fine print of its new policy, which is recycled steel raw material imports, it might take about 3 to 5 months before actual trades start happening. Vietnam, emerging market in the scrap trade, and of course, Japan, keeping its supplies pretty good at this point. With this, I'd like to conclude this webinar. Gentlemen and lady, it's been an absolute pleasure to be here talking to all of you. Thank you very much for your time today and for sharing all of your insights. Thank you very much, all of the participants. Thank you for your comments and for your questions. I'd like to wish you all in advance a Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year. I hope 2021 works out to be great for all of you. Thank you and goodbye.